My name is Ashley Brown, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Resource Center of Manatee and host of A Woman's Place on METV. We're at Manatee Educational TV, joined by a studio audience in honor of National Women's History Month. We've been celebrating Women's History Month throughout the month of March, and one of our events was an essay contest with Pace Center for Girls. Pace Center for Girls of Manatee County is a non-residential program for girls 12 to 18 years of age who are at risk of not finishing their education. Since 1989, PACE has provided girls and young women in Manatee County the opportunity for a better future through education, counseling, training, and advocacy. PACE values all girls and young women, believing each one deserves an opportunity to find her voice, achieve her potential, and celebrate a life defined by responsibility, dignity, serenity, and grace. Marilyn Bolick, a board member of the Women's Resource Center, worked with Sandy Grosclose and Emily with Pace Center for Girls, and let me tell you, they did an outstanding job. The winners of the contest are joining us here, so I'd like to congratulate you all and start with the fourth place, Cheyenne Brown. Congratulations, you did a great job. Okay, there's money, so don't lose that one. And third place, Marissa Butler. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
It was, all of you all did a great job. It was a hard decision. Second place is Anna Margerson? Margerson. I was so close. Congratulations. And Anna's going to be dancing for us later. Yeah. That's what we heard. And the first place winner, Miranda Harden. Congratulations. And you actually chose to write on the founder of Pace Center for Girls. So, and I heard that you actually called and spoke to her.
I emailed her.
And had a whole, wonderful. So you really got into the project and finding something that was close to your heart, which is great. Congratulations. Let's all give the girls a big round of applause. Hi, ladies. We're joined today by two guests who are experts in two issues that women have been dealing with for centuries: weight and fertility. Local psychologist Dr. Roxanne Dinkin will be speaking about her book, Infertility in the Creative Spirit, and cognitive behavioral therapist Karen Koenig will be speaking about her book, Nice Girls Finish Fat, which some people have a little issue with the name, but that's, that's okay. And I have to say, I'm gonna start with you since you're just to my left. When I met you, my first thought was, how do you write a book called Nice Girls Finish Fat when I could carry you? That right?
Well, I am a recovered chronic dieter and binge eater, and a recovered nice girl. So if you had known me decades ago, you probably would have looked at me and thought differently.
So tell us a little bit about the book and what led you to write it.
I've been working with mostly women who have eating or weight issues for about 30 years. And what I noticed in the groups that I ran was I'd have all these amazing women, you know, really great in their careers, giving a lot to their community. And we had this exercise in the beginning, and I'd say, well, say your favorite thing about yourself. And they'd go around the room and they'd say, well, I guess I'm nice. And then somebody else would say, well, I'm nice. And I realized that women valued niceness so far above everything else that they were getting stuck with their eating because they were so nice to other people and they didn't take great care of themselves except through food.
Well, great. And we're excited to dig a little more into that because weight is always one of those topics that everyone's been there. And then Dr. Roxanne Dinkin, who's a local psychologist, welcome. And your book is Infertility in the Creative Spirit.
Right.
And which is coming out in a couple of weeks, correct?
It'll be out in 2 weeks, and
People can order it from their favorite online bookseller.
Well, good. And this was a project with you and your husband?
And my husband, Robert Dinkin, who's a retired professor of American history and a women's historian as well.
Well, wonderful. Well, I think that Joanne Clement, who's in our studio audience, when we were talking about topics particular for Women's History Month, and certainly we've been honoring the spirit of women in that piece, but the things that women are constantly dealing with, these were kind of two issues that came up. And I Googled both of them, and dieting beat out infertility, but not by much. But when I Googled diets, there were over 28 million articles, and that was just diets. I didn't do like, I'm fat and want to lose weight or any of those other things. It was just diets. So a lot of people are interested in this, but you take a different approach as it's a cognitive behavior therapist. Tell me what that is.
Well, I'm actually more than that, but cognitive behavioral theory says that our beliefs and our beliefs generate our behavior and our feelings. So if you have irrational and unhealthy beliefs, you're going to have unhealthy behavior. If you change your beliefs and make them rational and healthy, you have a much better shot at having healthy behaviors.
And so a lot of your work has been based in that vein.
Yes, trying to change not just behaviors, which is what diets do, but trying to change people or women's view of food, their bodies, eating, weight. Yes. Which
is good. And you said earlier that you were an overeater, and that kind of led you even to, and I had the opportunity to hear you speak last week, and there was a book that you mentioned that kind of changed your relationship with food, and it was The Feminist, and
it's called Fat is a Feminist Issue, and It was written in the 80s. And what it said is you don't have to diet and you don't have to binge. You can connect to your normal intuition and your appetite and learn to regulate food, which was a real aha. And I decided to try it, and I consider myself a normal eater now. And once you get to that point, you don't have to struggle with food anymore.
And going from, just by studio applause, how many people have been on a diet before? Right, okay. So, from the standpoint of, and like I have been on many diets, but that getting out of the cycle, and because it's such a low percentage of people that truly are successful dieting, that's what I liked about your book. It's not a diet. It's more of looking at why you make the choices that you do. Would you say that that was more accurate?
Yes, I'm part of a movement which is actually an international movement and has been around since the 80s, which is a non-diet approach to eating. Diets are external. They get you not to trust your body. They look at foods as good and bad, as if there's a morality about it. And the non-diet approach works on intuition and the natural appetite that we're born with. To know when you're hungry, eat when you're hungry for fuel, to make choices that satisfy you, to stay aware when you eat and really try to enjoy food, and to stop when you're full or satisfied. And that's what normal eaters do. So what I call troubled eaters get to relearn what they once knew before they dieted.
And the term nice girl, tell us what you mean by that.
Nice girls have certain characteristics, and people often say, well, are there nice men? Are there nice boys? Yes, there are. But because of culture, our gender has been pushed into the niceness slot more than men have. Nice girls tend to be people pleasers, other-oriented, put themselves last, perfectionists. They are the go-to people. If you need something done, you go to a nice girl because she won't say no. She'll say, yes, of course I'll do that, and smile while she's doing it. They have difficulty letting go of control, delegating. they don't enjoy taking and getting as much as they do giving. They're very other-oriented. And the way they take care of themselves, unfortunately, too often is what I call through multiple trips to the refrigerator.
Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things in your book, that not feeling comfortable asking for help, or they're always there to listen to their friend, but when they really need to vent or they're not comfortable saying, I need for you to listen to me because I had a bad day, or this is my moment. So is it about setting boundaries, and like clear boundaries for yourself and putting yourself first in that selfish word?
Yes, nice girls think that selfish, is a terrible word, and they think of it negatively as opposed to taking care of self. But I think that it really goes deeper, that nice girls feel that the only way they are acceptable and lovable is if they're nice, that if they let out their anger, irritation, upset, if they confront other people, they're going to lose love and not be lovable. So it's really going back to those core beliefs of we're all lovable and deserving of good things. We don't have to be nice to get them. So I don't want nice girls to stop being nice. I want them to add more qualities, or as I said, just don't take one crayon out of the box, but use all the crayons in the box and add qualities to their niceness.
It was interesting, and I was having the same conversation, and now I can't remember on what it was about, but it was, actually, huge scientific thing. It was on Law and Order, so we know it was all based in fact.
No, it's true.
I know, but it was. So, but it was women who are strong, assertive, whether it's in business, whether it's in their personal life, and opinionated, often are labeled with a derogatory term. But men are seen as strong, aggressive, capable. So do you think that there's any shift towards women not getting the bad name tag from being assertive and kind of putting ourselves out there of this is what I want and being comfortable with that and this is what I need? Or do you think the shift is still, that makes you kind of a witchy woman?
I think it's a slow process, and as women change, that forces society to change, and as society changes, it makes it easier for women. So there's a synergy to it, but we still got a ways to go to be equal to men in the range of responses that we can give. On the other hand, men are very locked into positions also.
Absolutely.
So I think we certainly are moving a lot closer to having a range of behaviors in both genders, and I'm very happy about it.
Well, good. And that's kind of a beautiful natural segue into Roxanne, what your book is about. And I also Googled, very good with the Googling. Infertility, there were over 14 million articles on infertility. And when I also Googled, just for curiosity, infertility in the creative spirit, just to see, and there were 38,000. So your book's going to be right on the top when that happens, so that's good. But I think certainly your book is a really interesting study of late 19th, early 20th century, when it was much more expected, maybe is the right word, for women to have children.
Right, it was a very strong expectation with fewer other alternative models than there are today. And we also selected that period of history because it was the time before reproductive technology and before the birth control pill. So prior to 1960. And in your book, which is not out yet, so no one has had the opportunity to read, but you focused on 7 women in history who were unable to have children, but they focused that creative energy into some really amazing things. Yes.
Juliette Low, who was the founder of Girl Scouts. So why these 7 women?
Well, we chose these 7 women. We needed, first of all, to have women who were well known enough to have left a record of their feelings about infertility. So that meant diaries, letters, autobiographies, and women who other people had written biographies about and had studied, so that we could go to the record and find out how they felt and try to answer the question of how did they adapt to this event of infertility? How did they adapt to women wanting to have children and not being able to?
And did you find that there were some commonalities between, and it goes from the Juliette Lowe
right
to Marilyn Monroe. So
yes.
they're, you know, opposite kind of ends of the
right.
spectrum.
And so we're
there.
spanning about 100 years. There were some commonalities. One is that women, when they were unable to have the children that they wanted to, and we did focus on women who wanted to have children as opposed to women who either did not marry, did not have the opportunity, or perhaps married too late. In other words, we looked for women who actually tried and were infertile.
And did you find through writings and those things that, I mean, these really were blatantly open about we're trying to
Yes.
have children, or interesting?
Yes, or they talked to other people about it. Yes. So when they were unable to have the children that they wanted and they were unable to become mothers, then they grieved. Okay, they were sad, they grieved, some became quite depressed. The other thing that happened is that they were, in terms of their role in society, they moved from being in the role they wanted, in the center of society, toward the margins of society. So you could say they became marginalized. And from that point of view, they could look at society a little differently. They no longer had the opportunity to pass on their own genetic heritage or their own material possessions, which most people assume that they will do and want to. So they were grieving, they were marginalized, and then because they were not putting energy into child rearing, that opened up energy that was available for other activities. So when they began to release their creativity following a period of grieving, they were often able to look at things in a very innovative way. And that was the commonality that we found. They looked for example, Juliette Lowe, who founded the Girl Scouts, was a very interesting and amazing person. And she really helped to redefine the relationship between women and work in the early part of the 1900s.
So, and I think that, as well as when I was reading her biography, because I kind of went in to read some of the others, and those that know me are shocked right now that I did some research, can tell. But that, that they actually said she didn't have children, thus had the time to give toward the building the Girl Scouts.
Right, right.
And, you know, taking on something that became an international kind of phenomenon for sure, that's still going strong.
And all of these women, including Juliette Lowe, were really ahead of their times in what they were doing. That was the interesting thing, the interesting commonality. Juliette Lowe really foresaw that women would be working more and more. And she really had a vision of international peace. So she was ahead of her times. Joy Adamson, who wrote Born Free, people may remember Elsa the Lion and the movie Born Free. She was way ahead of her times in seeing that the habitat of wild animals, and she was particularly interested in the big cats of Africa. She saw that the habitat was being threatened and that populations were decreasing. And that was way before actually lion populations decreased. And so she perceived a different relationship between people and wild animals.
And that was in the 19, what?
She died in the 60s.
So that was like 40s, 50s that she was doing. So certainly way before it became the cause du jour, so to speak.
Right, certainly way before it was a cause du jour.
And that is the span of women that you chose,
yes.
the variety of women.
Yes.
What made you decide, other than the availability of writings, was there something that kind of piqued your interest even to writing this book?
Well, we wrote the book. It came out of our own experience originally because we were infertile as a couple. And so we ask ourselves, what could we create? We can't create a biological child. What can we create? And so we combined our fields. I was at the time working as a clinical psychologist in San Francisco, and I was consulting to the in vitro fertilization program at University of California at San Francisco Medical Center. And I had written a workbook to help couples prepare for IVF, which can be very, very stressful. My husband, who's now retired, was a professor of American history and taught women's history. So we combined women's history and the psychology of infertility. And it was kind of a natural because we had both always loved reading women's autobiographies and women's diaries. So when we got the idea, we just started looking around the house and reading. And we found, then we started further search, and we ultimately identified about 100 people, 100 women in recent history who were infertile. And we chose these 7 not just because of the record that they left, but because we wanted to have a range in terms of how much the particular woman wanted children. We wanted to kind of have a continuum of people, so that some people, for example, Frida Kahlo, Joy Adamson, Josephine Baker, and Marilyn Monroe always kept trying to have children. They never stopped trying. Juliette Lowe lived before there was really any possibility of any kind of help. And then the anthropologist Ruth Benedict and the anarchist Emma Goldman were relatively accepting of their infertility. So we wanted to really have a continuum, and we wanted to address and make normal the issue of ambivalence about having children. Because what we found was...
Wait a second, repeat that for me. You wanted to make normal?
Normal and acceptable and talked about in the research literature the issue of being ambivalent about having children. And what I mean by that is, it's normal to be ambivalent about having children. It's normal to think about it, prepare for it, decide, are we ready, are we not ready? Because it's the biggest change that a woman is likely to have in her life in terms of her role, her energy. So it's completely normal to have some ambivalence and go ahead and have children. But when it comes to infertility, people seem to think that ambivalence is not normal, or it doesn't exist. And what we found, for example, reading about Frida Kahlo, the Mexican artist, one writer would emphasize that all of her art came from her frustrated maternity, which is an exaggeration because her art came from her profound artistic talent and her brilliance. And then another writer would say, no, that's wrong. She didn't want to have children. So there were very few people that are writing in between. She was ambivalent about having children. She had reasons for ambivalence, the same kind of reasons that people might be ambivalent today in a marriage. Her husband did not want children. He had a very poor track record of staying with and taking care of children. She had some genetic issues that she was concerned about passing on. There seemed to be kind of ongoing infertility issues with her and all of her sisters, so there was something perhaps genetic there. So those are the same issues today that people would think about. Do both people want to have children? Am I going to pass on a genetic illness?
Do you find that I have 2 wonderful stepchildren, but I don't have any biological children of my own, and it seems to bother other people more than it bothers me, because it's a choice I made and it was fine, and I'm really good with my choice, but it bothers other people more so than I think sometimes the women who choose not to have children. People like to have an opinion on it, for sure.
Yes. And I think that goes back to that same issue of there being a continuum of desire and wishes regarding children, and then a continuum of life situations and decisions that are available to women. And so partly this book is about honoring all of that. We want to honor infertile women. We want to honor their right to be ambivalent. We want to honor their right to make the choices that they make, which might be to adopt. Today it might be to pursue reproductive technology, or it might be to have a very nurturing relationship with nieces and nephews. It might be being involved in some other kind of nurturing activity, such as with animals. It might be parenting through being a step-parent.
Yes, and I got them when they were done, so it was perfect. It was great. So, and I'm going to switch back. We're going, you know, certainly both topics bring up some real passion. And the external is also very present in the weight issue. And I think that fat phobic, was that the term you used? That, do you feel that right now we're living in?
We are living, without a doubt, in the most fat-phobic, thin-obsessed culture in the history of the world.
That's not a good thing.
No, it's a terrible thing.
Fat being in. Let's do it. No?
Well,
Healthy?
You know, we would need a good famine for that to happen, and very quickly it would be in. Now, and this is in, you know, countries where food is plentiful. But in our particular culture, we are not only fat phobic, but we're thin obsessed. And if you go to Europe, they're not nearly as wild about thinness. So it's a very hard place and a very hard time to be a woman, particularly a woman who isn't doesn't have the standard or acceptable measurements.
Well, and the percentage of our ideal. Like if everyone's looking in the magazine, I want to have this perfect body. Is that 8% of women are genetically?
7%
7%
of women, adult women, have the kind of body that we consider perfect for a woman. Tall, long-limbed, big-breasted, small waist. 7% are born that way. And 93% of us want to look like that.
And
it's
those
very
are
sad.
not good odds. But even with those bad odds, it's still, and I think that the continuing of the dieting piece and always on a diet, which is what I really liked about your book, is it's the behavior change, and it's not thinking of, I have to do this, and go for healthful, what's normal, and not starving, binging, which I think most people get in that cycle of, I've got a wedding coming up, I've got a graduation, I've got something, so I'm going to lose 20 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever it happens to be. So how effective do you think getting people's mindset to change can be from that?
Well, it's very important because this statistic has stayed true since I started doing my work in the 1980s. About 95% of people who diet and lose weight regain it, and 90% regain more than they originally lost, and most of it is in the form of fat. It's not like we regain muscle. So there's 5% chance that you're going to succeed at a diet for life. And, you know, I know if I offered you, you know, that kind of statistics and said, you know, would you like to buy this and you have a 5% chance that it'll work, you'd say, you know, never mind. But we are really sold a bill of goods about having to look a certain way. And then we end up distrusting our bodies. And the whole idea of the normal eating or the intuitive eating movement is to trust your body. We have had, you know, we have survived because we've known as a species what to eat and how to eat. And we know that, most of us. It's just a question of relearning it. And as I said before, once you can relearn this, you have it for life and you never have to diet again, and you have a good relationship with food.
It's not your enemy.
Right, and it never was, but you know, this idea of good bad food has
the morality.
Right, has made us think that if we eat salads, good food, we're good people. If we eat chocolate cake, bad food, bad people. And that's ridiculous.
I'm going to take this kind of minute because I want to get some more into both of the books and the work you all have done. But I want to open up to some questions for the audience, and we have 2 helpers with microphones. So anybody with a question? Yes, up, down front.
This is for Dr. Dinkin. I'm wondering, why don't more women, particularly the ones that you wrote about, didn't think of adopting children? Women who are infertile, why don't they look at adoption as a possibility?
Well, one of our subjects did adapt through adoption, and that was Josephine Baker. She adopted 12 children, and she called them the Rainbow Tribe. And she had a vision of not only adopting and raising children who were unwanted, in some cases like literally thrown into a garbage bin. She also had a vision that through having children in a family who came from different races and different religions, different ethnic backgrounds, that she was creating a vision of, again, world brotherhood, that people from different and disparate backgrounds could live in peace. The other very interesting thing about Josephine Baker, and where again she was very much ahead of her time, is she made sure that for the most part each child was connected with their origins, with their national and their linguistic origins, which isn't something that started happening broadly until very recently.
Angelina Jolie.
India Farrow. But what about the other women? Did Juliette Lowe, Frida Kahlo, any of those think of adopting?
Marilyn Monroe thought of adopting and was visiting actual orphanages shortly before she died. Frida Kahlo did not think of adopting. I think Juliette Lowe did not adopt because she was by that time single, and I don't think that would have been really acceptable within her particular social circle at that time in history. Also, because there was no reproductive technology, some of the women just kept trying and trying. So by the time they gave up and had sort of launched into their creative work that they were doing in the world, by that time, quite a few of them were around 50 years old. So somewhat more so then than now, people would not think of starting a family. So I think that's the general answer for our subjects, but certainly adoption was common historically. And
one guy.
People often, you know, because people died earlier, people died in childbirth, often the relatives adopted the children and raised them.
Great, good question. I know someone has to have a diet question. Really? No diet question?
I have a question.
as far as dieting, sometimes doctors recommend a strict diet. Maybe you're diabetic, or maybe you're going in for heart surgery, or, you know, and then those diets tend to circulate on the internet sometimes. What is your opinion of you know, having to do that, and, you know, some of those crash diets that are actually kind of medically recommended?
Diets simply do not work long term. If you're preparing for surgery and you're on a diet for 2 weeks in preparation for surgery, that's different than arbitrarily restricting food to a certain number of calories or only certain foods. What happens is the body, when you take in less food, the body thinks that we're back on the plains and in the forests and there's not enough food, and the metabolism slows down. And we all know at first you lose weight like that, and then your body, because your body is just trying to preserve our species. It doesn't care how you're going to look at a wedding. It just wants to know that you're going to survive. So metabolism slows down. The other thing that happens for crash diets is you look around and everybody else is having fun and you feel deprived. And then that causes what's called rebound eating. So when calories get very low, we become preoccupied with food. And then our thinking isn't as clear and we become impulsive. So that's the long answer to your question. The short answer is I think crash diets are very unhealthy, even when doctors recommend them. They simply do not work long term.
So no crash dieting, Sandy?
No crash dieting. Of course, I never would anyway.
No, but there are a lot of people that do that. So
I was just going to add that by the time I see people in my practice, they have gained and lost and lost and gained hundreds of pounds. So they know diets don't work. By the time they get to me, they really want to learn how to not diet and not binge and eat normally.
And I think that, you know, I keep using the diet word because I think that's just so ingrained in our society and our thought process. But truly, reading some of the stories of the people in your book, there were real issues. One who had a miscarriage and never grieved, and kind of food was the way, and being busy and needed and helpful was the way that she coped, and just on dealing with taking care of yourself, including you deserve to eat healthfully, you deserve to exercise or take a yoga class or do something. And I think it's shifting that paradigm of diet. Because that's, I'm on a diet. I've got to eat lettuce. Then you hate lettuce.
And you hate eating.
Yeah. I think an interesting thing, I'm going to ask my own question. Sorry, John, we'll get back to you in a second. That you were talking about finding what your body wanted in a trip you took to the grocery store when maybe people thought you were crazy, but that's okay. Because just kind of letting your body tell you what it wants.
Yeah, I'd been trying not to eat anything, quote, fattening for so long and just eat healthy that this was when I was in my 20s, I had just lost touch with what my body wanted, and I was trying to learn what did I really want. And I was in a grocery store one night. I'd put my robe on over my pajamas and my raincoat on over my robe, and I was in the store so long that the clerk actually asked me if I was okay, because I was walking up and down the aisles trying to figure out what I wanted to eat. And I think we do need to relearn that. You know, we think we should eat certain foods, and as soon as we say should, that should be a warning that it's not coming from internally. It's not coming from cravings. I mean, sometimes you're really in the mood for broccoli, and sometimes you're really in the mood for a piece of fudge, and they're very, very different.
And you just hope that it balances out.
Well,
and that you're not always wanting fudge.
It does. You know, normal eaters eat fudge, they eat foods that are, quote, high fat and high sugar. But they don't overeat them. When they eat them, they don't feel guilty, and they're not eating them in a corner in the dark, feeling ashamed. So they get pleasure out of it. They're in touch with their body, and they just stop when they're done. You know, they may have a little piece of something and say, well, I'll throw it away, or I'll have the rest of it later. So it does balance out.
Which is, I think, just everyone shifting the paradigm of it's not a diet.
Right, to toss out the whole idea of dieting completely.
I think I would sign up for that. I would go for that. And now, Roxanne, I'm going to go back to you and your husband were unable to have children.
Right.
And when you started writing and researching your book, did you feel that this was it a cathartic time for you, or had you already moved through that process and were okay with
I think it
your
was
lot?
cathartic, and I think there is, if you've wanted children, there is kind of a lingering sadness that doesn't fully go away. And we're now at the age where we can't quite imagine having an older teen in the house. We're just fine. And I think we coped in many ways. But yes, the book was part of that catharsis. Our relationships with nieces and nephews are part of that.
Absolutely.
And, I also am now a step-grandmother. And
Me
that's
too.
a delightful experience. And Grandparents' Day is coming up in a couple of weeks.
It is?
It is.
Were we aware of that? We need presents for Grandparents' Day. No, but that, namely because it's fun to say I'm a grandparent and get people to see how polite they're going to be to figure out how that happened. So, because I look so young is the point there. And I think for both issues, with fertility and weight, it's kind of, I think women in particular, and I don't know if men do as much deprecating on both the weight issue and the childbearing, and is it something even you want to do, but I think women are so hard on themselves.
Interestingly, the research shows that even when infertility in a couple is due to male factor infertility, the women blame themselves.
What? Why?
Well, that's what the research shows, and one of the things I write about in the book is that it's because pregnancy occurs in the woman's body, it's a more personal experience, and there's a feeling of wanting life growing inside, and that doesn't happen. So for many women it can lead to, when I worked in the field in San Francisco, routinely women became clinically depressed
I would
over
imagine.
the course of infertility.
Well, in the processes of going through trying to have a child and the in vitro and all, the hormones, which normal hormones are enough.
Right.
And you add those.
Right.
And I mean, I've had friends that have gone through it, and it's
very
devastating.
stressful. And
Especially
again,
when it
the
doesn't work.
chances, they're probably improved now, but the chances are somewhat higher than being a successful dieter, but not a lot higher.
Really?
Yes, and that's why I wrote the workbook, to help people prepare.
So those are not good odds on either end.
They're not good odds.
Well, that's kind of
They're better
depressing.
now.
Well, science certainly
yes,
has come a long way. The in your Nice Girls Finish Fat, you have, and I'm not going to come up with the right name. It's the I'm going to cheat and look on the back of it. It's the recovery tips, and on one of those, it is be kind to yourself. When you don't degrade yourself when you do make choices that aren't great. And I think that is something in particular with women that is an issue. And I don't know if it's a control or what it comes from.
Well, the great irony is that nice girls are so nice to other people. They go out of their way not to hurt their feelings, to take care of them, to be kind, empathic, compassionate, and then they just beat themselves over the head. They are exactly opposite. So what I try to teach them is to be as compassionate to yourself as you are to other people, and to never say anything to yourself that you would not say to a small child that you love. Period, end of story. That only be kind to yourself. And it's a revolutionary thought, because women are very hard on themselves. And they feel responsible for everything that goes wrong. I mean, that's the other problem with nice girls. They want to fix everyone. They want to fix the world. They can't stand feeling helpless. And, you know, it doesn't work, because then you lose yourself in it.
And this has been going on forever. That's kind of, I'm now depressed. I'm going to have to go eat fudge. No, I want to talk about the, but it has. And when you actually are looking at the quizzes that you have in here, it's your kind of, as I was taking it, and no laughing from the people that know me, I have a lot of the nice girl tendencies. Controlling is one which everyone agrees with, so that one we'll go with. But you've been working with a series called Beyond the Scale. Tell us a little bit about that series.
It is a 12-week workshop taught by a team. I'm a part of the team. Beth Curry is a fitness trainer, exercise trainer, and Ariel Robage is a registered dietitian, and Diane Tennant is covering it in the Sarasota Herald in the health and fitness section. She is the editor of that section. Let's see, tomorrow will be, I think, the 9th week, and then we teach on Wednesday nights. It's 3 more sessions, and we're teaching people how to attack eating problems from what I do, the psychology of eating, and nutritionally, and through fitness. And it's been really exciting.
And so do you have a group of people that are going through this?
We do. And if you go to the Herald website and put in Beyond the Scale, or there's a Facebook page, you can see little profiles of everyone and what we've been studying each week.
Now, is this series going to continue, I'm assuming, but with maybe different teachers coming in? Is that after this 12-week cycle ends, or?
Yeah, yes, I believe that there's going to be another section. I'm not sure who's going to be a part of it, but we do want to continue it. The thing that's really great about it is it gives you the sense that it takes a long time. It's 12 weeks. Really gives you time to change, as opposed to 2 weeks. You can't change behavior in 2 weeks. Yes. So 12 weeks is just enough time to start making some important changes.
Now, for our Oprah moment, here's our Oprah moment, and it's not a car. But through working with Beyond the Scale, everyone in the studio audience, including Pace Girls, so before you say, does that include us? We'll be receiving gift certificates from Beth Brown and Ariel Robage. Is that correct?
Ariel Robage.
From Beyond the Scale. So we've got free nutrition, and Bethany has all of the coupons for you, so which is great. So thanks to them. It's almost as good as a new car. It's close. It's really close. I want to have a few more questions from the studio audience, and then we're actually to the time where we have to start wrapping up. So any other, yes, Bethany.
Excuse me. First of all, on behalf of the entire gender, I'm going to say I don't ever wish that I was bearing any children. I'll tell you that right up front. But I do have a question. We kind of focused with Dr. Dinkin's conversation, we focused on the question of the infertility and the depression or the emotional impact. I'm wondering about the creative part of it, and whether or not the research indicates that the creativity comes about as a result of this depression, or it's the free time or the time that's freed up by not having to raise children.
Okay, that's
Good
a
question.
great question and a complex one too. When we selected 7 famous women in history, we were, by definition, selecting women who were unusually talented and gifted. So in a way, we can't generalize, and we don't really try to generalize, and certainly their experiences were not necessarily typical of what women were experiencing in their particular eras. Having said that, the grieving is related to the creativity in that part of grieving is about reconstructing one's world. So for many of these women, and we could take Juliette Lowe as an example, she was born into a wealthy family. She married an even wealthier man who in Great Britain, and she did not produce an heir for him. Okay, so this was completely devastating. And he then became ill. His behavior became more and more bizarre, and they separated. He ultimately died before they divorced. But her world was shattered. So the question was, how did she rebuild that world? How did she go about recreating new meaning? And the ways that she did it were really fascinating. And they speak to the opportunities that are available at that particular historical time, and that individual's interests and skills and how they go about recreating meaning and rebuilding a purpose in life using the skills that they have. And she, and this was one of the most exciting parts of doing the research for the book, was finding her letters and understanding that when she separated from her husband, that she began a process of learning skills to take care of herself and manage her life that she had never done before. And so part of what she was doing with the Girl Scouts was teaching skills to girls and young women. So that's an example of that. For each of them, it was rebuilding their lives. And that does come out of the grieving process.
That's good. Changing perspective too.
Mm-hmm.
What you thought your life was going to be,
yes,
it's going to be something different.
It's going to be something completely different.
So good. Any other?
I have one for Dr. Dinkin.
Yes.
In doing your research for your book and preparing those materials, did you develop any type of special bond to one of the particular women that you studied personally for yourself?
Well, going through, we concentrated on one person at a time. And during that period of concentration, I would feel very deeply identified with the woman, and I felt like I would see her life visually and feel her feelings. And I didn't do this is a very interesting part of the process for me, is that was not really a verbal process. It was taking place on the level of visual imagery and feelings. So that happened with each of them. It happened the most with the anthropologist Ruth Benedict and with Juliette Lowe. And I think it might have happened most with Juliette Lowe because what we found with her had not been really ever written about before. So there's a tremendous excitement in going to the archives. For example, Juliette Lowe, we went to the Georgia Historical Society and the Gordon family letters that were at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Ruth Benedict, I spent a week at Vassar College in the basement of the library there with her archives that had been recently opened. Marilyn Monroe went to the National Library of Congress and read the correspondence between her psychoanalyst and Anna Freud. So those were the really exciting things. And I think it was when I had the most opportunity to do that that I would become most deeply involved with that person's life.
And how long of a process was it for writing your book?
Well, we did most of the research in the academic year 1988-1999 when we were visiting scholars at Duke University. And we each took sabbaticals from our usual work, and we were visiting scholars in the Department of Women's Studies. So we were there doing research, both of us full-time for a whole year, and then we've been continuing the writing process ever since. So a good 12 years.
So that one of the PACE girls asked me, I think it was Marissa, that both of you actually had books published, and what a cool thing that was. So for you, you have many books published. Four. So when did you start writing?
I started, you mean any kind of writing, or you mean writing my books?
Writing specifically about your books that are published to this.
I probably started my first book, which is The Rules of Normal Eating, in 2003, and it was published in 2005. And that came fairly easily. My second book is a Food and Feelings workbook, which took a whole lot of work and a whole lot of editing. My third book is for therapists and nice girls. I just banged out a rough draft in a week. I took time off and I just did 9 to 5 every day, and got a rough draft out. So I think, depending on your subject, that determines how long it takes you to write and how much time you have.
Well, and to be published, I think, is an amazing thing. Just having the fortitude and follow through, because I think there's lots of people who have said, I want to write a book, or that's something to do, but it takes a tremendous amount of work. So I'm in awe of both of you for making it to that piece. I want to thank you both for being here, but I'd like to kind of ask for some final thoughts from both of you as we're wrapping up. And did we have any other questions? We're good. You guys were great studio audience. But Roxanne?
Well, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be celebrating Women's History Month. And thank you to the Women's Resource Center and everyone on the staff of the Women's Resource Center, and to METV for making this possible. And part of what we hope to do with the book goes very much along with Women's History Month, and that is bringing attention to a topic that's been relatively ignored in the writing of women's history.
Because it's one of those touchy ones that people prefer to talk about it in the corner. So certainly. Well, thank you for being here. And Karen, wait, before I go to you, I'm sorry. We've got websites for both of you under your name. So for your book that's coming out in several weeks.
People can actually order it through the website
in
2 weeks, or they can go to their favorite online bookseller.
Okay, great.
And it'll be an ebook and a paperback.
The ebook. It's amazing.
Well, I wanted to say congratulations.
Thank you.
I look forward to reading your book.
Thank you.
I want to thank you and the Women's Resource Center and METV. This was a lot of fun. These are two of my books, and I have to say that I write with humor. It's very hard for me to write something that's not funny because I don't enjoy it. I really enjoy being humorous and connecting. And I encourage people to go to my website, and for all of you nice girls out there, I want you to get out more crayons than that one in the box. And
Absolutely.
for you men who know nice girls, to really encourage them to expand their personalities and take really good care of themselves.
Which is great. And that was very nice of both of you to thank us and METV, which was not the purpose of that, but bonus for me, which is great. But it was wonderful having you here. So I'd just like to thank you both for being here and taking time out of what I know is a busy schedule for you all. And I really appreciate the studio audience being here. And this is a first for me, and making it through without really laughing, I think, is great. And I'd like to do one more round of applause for our PACE Center for Girls and the essay winners. you guys did just a really wonderful job. We weren't sure what to expect. This is our first year, and we were overwhelmed with the response, and your talents are great. So again, thank you, studio audience, for joining us at METV Studios for A Woman's Place, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
That's great.